Subtle skills, big results.
Welcome to the Ninja Selling Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Ninja Selling Podcast. I'm Matt, he's Garrett, and we have a special guest today. This is going to be an amazing conversation. Before we dive into it, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We're excited to have you. And if you're new to Ninja Selling and want to learn more, head over to ninjaselling.com where you can learn all about our trainings, coachings, and all of those things. And Garrett will probably tell you a little bit more when we wrap up the episode, but I'm excited to get to the meat of today, which is our guest, John Israel, also known as Mr. Thank You. John, welcome to the podcast, first of all.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely, man. Very excited to have you here, John, because we got connected through a client of mine, Dennis Tuttle in Texas, and he was reading all these books and he mentioned your book and sent me a copy of it. And I read it and I just think it's such a, and this is what the book looks like if we have any video that goes out on this. And it aligns so well with what we do at Ninja Selling. So I was happy to dive in. And so a little bit about John for those of you who are listening. John is a family man, he's a businessman, and a major advocate of gratitude. He's also a keynote speaker, author, and coach, obviously an author because he wrote this book. And after years in business, he started this experiment around gratitude and the human connection and decided to embark on this project, which he's going to talk a little bit about. And he's been featured all over the place, major news outlets, has a TED Talk out there. If you go and Google him or YouTube him, you'll find his TED Talk, which is really awesome as well. And currently residing in Dallas, Texas. We were just talking about moved to a new home recently with his 4 kids. So welcome, John. We're excited to have you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah. The farm that we moved to, so we just bought 6 acres, and it's so funny. We'll talk about ultimately somewhat of what we're talking about today is relationship building. And, it's interesting because I get to speak to real estate audiences all over the country. And it's whether it might come up or not is like, how do we even pick our realtor out of knowing thousands and thousands of people, right? How do you pick and choose the right person? But, I think that ultimately how all of our relationships ever get built is through alignment and values, right? Which is kind of how we got connected here today. So I'm grateful Dennis made the introduction. Super generous dude. We met through a speech. Someone gave him a copy of my book. We've, come out and spoke for his team. We've become great friends. And he's just a huge advocate of ninja selling. And I hear about you guys all the time. So I'm excited to finally get connected on this podcast.
Yeah.
John, where I'm excited to go down this path with you today, and good morning, everybody, is that you talked about how you pick somebody, whether it's a realtor, whether it's any type of service. And I think a lot of people get stuck in the mindset that's like, if I'm really good at my job, everybody's going to want to use me. And I think it's an element of being highly, referable and highly, easy to recommend is this idea that you're really good at your job. What I find for most people, and this is why I'm so excited to talk with you today and go down these paths, is that for the most part, it's the gratitude and the value that you bring into people's lives that sets you apart as a person compared to everybody else, is the stuff that makes people go, I want to refer that person. I want to send, and it's not like I want to better their life or make them better. It's just like, it just feels good to be able to help them the way that they've helped me. And it's just this give and take of energy that is so powerful. And I love that you did this project and you threw yourself into this, because a lot of people dabble with it and very few go all in like you have.
Yeah, well, gratitude, what's funny is if we had to sum up what I talk about with organizations, it's how do you make gratitude your competitive advantage? But when most people think about gratitude, it's this very passive thing, or it's a very obligatory thing, right? Like, I got a gift, I should send a card, or I got a referral, I should send him a gift card and a thank you card, or I should write in a journal. I think one of the biggest things, I know we'll dive into the project that I got out of this year-long experiment that I ran, is that when you can learn how to access gratitude at the drop of a hat, you're the most powerful person in the room, because you have the ability to influence your emotions. You have the ability to influence the emotions of others, because a grateful person is just someone we want to be around. Someone who helps us feel gratitude in the relationship is somebody we want to keep around. And so it's this very contagious thing that has to live deeper than the surface level, which is hopefully what we get to talk about today.
Absolutely. For those who don't know, let's explain what that project
is.
What is the Mr. Thank You project? And what was your catalyst and motivation for embarking on that project and that journey?
I'll tell you what the project is now and what it started as. So the Mr. Thank You Project is a global movement to inspire 74 million thank you projects around the world. And that was catalyzed because when I was in college, I remember hearing a professor talk about global warming and the effect of what we call collective neglect on the planet. And this concept he was sharing was, do you know what would happen on planet Earth if all the bodies of water and the atmosphere are elevated by 1 degree Celsius or Fahrenheit? Not good, right? That was the outcome. It would not be good for our planet. So he was just really talking about this 1 degree difference and the impact that has. And I thought that was interesting because he was really looking at this from a negative perspective. And now, by the way, I'm super, anti-pollution, and we can get better at how we treat the planet. But the point is, what if we could do something the opposite? What if we could have a net 1% positive impact on the planet? And that just stuck with me when I was about 20 years old. And then fast forward several years later, I am running a business, small business. One of the companies I run is called Mr. Thank You. We are a strategic gifting firm. So we work with real estate companies, mortgage companies. We help them build gifting strategies of how to love on and appreciate their clients. So we built this business at the perfect time to build anything in real estate, which is 2009. And
I'm going to say there's a couple of years that are not good years if you're being sarcastic. Keep going.
Yeah, it was brutal. God bless you if you made it through those years in real estate. But by 2016, we had actually built a very successful business. We were doing really well, but we had to grind through it, not unlike what people are experiencing right now. And here's this interesting dichotomy is back in 2009, when we started the business, I was actually feeling really excited internally while I was being really struggling externally, right? Because the market was tough, but I was excited to start a new business. Now, the opposite was also true in 2016, where I was doing well. We were making great money, but internally, I was over it. I was overworked, overwhelmed, and so stressed out. I didn't know if I could keep doing this. And it wasn't until I came home one day, and I'll never forget the visual because my wife was nursing our infant son in one arm and handwriting a thank you card in her other hand to some people who had helped and supported her during her pregnancy. And I come in to do what I normally do at the end of my workday, which is to complain about my day and just anything, right? Just what's wrong in them. Even though things are great at some aspects, I'm pointing out everything that's going wrong, all the things that didn't go well that day. And it was just a moment where you could tell she had it. And she looks at me and says, "Sweetheart, if you can't appreciate what we have now, who's to say you'll be any happier when you finally get what you say you want?"
Very wise woman.
Yeah.
And it was a moment that I knew she was right. And I didn't know what to do with it because I'm an achiever. And there's this concept that it's really a problem that most high achievers experience. It's called perpetual discontentment, which is the never ending experience that what we have isn't enough. And in some ways, it's very good because it causes us to improve. It causes us to look at our systems and our processes and ask, how do I make this better? But the problem is we never fully allow ourselves to be happy with what we have and where we are. So I knew something needed to change. Our mission at Mr. Thank You has always been to elevate the level of gratitude on the planet. But the problem was I was the most ungrateful leader you'd ever meet. So how can you be that? There's this great quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he says, "Excuse me, I cannot hear what you are saying because who you are speaks so loudly."
It's one of Garrett's favorite sayings, actually.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings, your actions are speaking so loud, I can't hear what you're saying.
So how can I be this guy who says he's about elevating gratitude on the planet, but yet I don't embody it in my life at all? And so I had a coach I was working with at the time, and I shared with him this problem. And so he's like, "Hey, it's simple, man. We just, we always talk about habits, Atomic Habits, Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And we talk about these concepts of a keystone habit, which is a single habit that has a multiplied positive effect." And my coach was really simple. He said, "Hey, man, what's one habit where you could implement that would help you access gratitude every day?" And the funny thing is what I saw or what I thought of was that moment when my wife called me out, but I saw her writing a handwritten card. So another side of this story is she had just given birth to our first child. And Normally, when a woman gives birth, it's a very stressful time, right? Hormonally, sleep deprivation, all these things. But she was the most gracious and patient that I'd ever seen her in our marriage. And the only thing I could relate it to is she was actually doing a gratitude project. And she didn't have a specific goal in mind. She had just made this commitment like, hey, I've been collecting thank you cards forever and never writing them. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm just going to keep writing them to every person who supported me during my pregnancy, everyone that matters to me. And I saw the change in her heart and how gentle and gracious she was. And I thought, what if I try something like that? So to kind of summarize it, I started a project in 2016 where I made a commitment to handwrite 5 thank you cards every single day for 365 consecutive days. There were 4 rules. 5 cards needed to be handwritten, so they couldn't be a text or a video or an email. Every day reset at 0. Okay, so I couldn't skip 3 days and then write 20 in a day. So, because if something's a habit, you truly do it every single day, no matter what. Third rule was I could write a max of 3 cards to any one person. Okay, so this means I couldn't write 75 to my mother because there's a lot of things I could thank my mother for, but I know they would also start to lose their impact and their luster if they kept going to the same people. And also part of this was for me to explore my capacity to experience and express gratitude, meaning looking for different people to appreciate. The fourth rule, which you guys might appreciate with your coaching organization, because my coach said, hey, John, I love this idea, but what's the accountability, right? Like what happens if or when you miss a day? And initially I said, how about I donate $100 to charity for every day that I miss writing my cards? I felt pretty good about that. And like any good coach, he looks at me and says, add a 0. And I was like, excuse me? You want me to donate $1,000 to charity for missing it from any day I miss writing my 5 cards? That's crazy. And he's like, well, I don't want you to have to write any checks, John, but let me ask you this. How likely is it you're probably going to donate $100 or several $100s to charities anyways? I was like, yeah, we kind of do that with our tithing process. He's like, okay, then you're giving yourself a way out. So if what's at stake every day is $1,000, how many days will you miss? I mean, what would you guys say in that scenario?
Probably very few.
Yeah.
Very few, if any. And I find the bigger the pain that you can create around that. I mean, even though it is a reward, at the end of the day, you can be like, oh, we gave $1,000 to a charity. We did something good. There's a certain point there where it's like, but let's not do that tomorrow. Like, let's.
Yeah, let's not whiff and do 3 days in a row. I don't know if my wife's going to be psyched of my sudden philanthropy efforts.
It's like, so I saw all this money leaving the bank account, honey. It was,
and that's what was at stake. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I honestly didn't have like a particular goal in mind, except for the one that I mentioned a moment ago, which is to explore my capacity to experience and express gratitude. Another way of saying that is learning how to access gratitude even when I don't feel like it. And that became one of the biggest unique challenges of the whole project.
well, let's talk about that, because I think that is something that everyone's challenged with, right? When we talk to people about gratitude, sometimes we're like, but today I just don't feel really grateful for everything. And if I say I'm grateful for something, it's not going to really mean anything because I'm really upset about this other thing or whatever it is, or life is hard. So how did you on the days, because I'm sure, over the course of an entire year, and still I'm sure with doing all the projects that you work on now, how do you overcome that? What are your strategies for getting yourself in a state of gratitude when maybe you just don't feel that way?
Yeah. So I'll give it's going to sound like a silly example, but I think there's a lot of power in this story. So I'm a graduate of Gonzaga University in Washington State. So a small school, but we're known for having a really good basketball team. So I'm a huge NCAA tournament fan. And in 2017, so the project overlapped with 2017, my team made it to the NCAA National Championship, which is the biggest thing that ever happened in our school's history. Huge deal.
Remember that.
And, if any listeners remember 2017, we clearly don't win. To this date, we have not won a national championship. But it was a really tough loss. And it's funny because I'm not a big sports guy, and I've always thought it was funny watching the end of a Super Bowl. They would show the losing teams downtown, and you'd see cars being flipped over and people lighting trash cans on fire. And I never understood it until that day, because I was so sad, depressed, angry, pissed, whatever word you want to use. I didn't feel good. And suddenly it's 9:00 at night. My wife puts our kids to bed. She had given birth to our second child. So we have 2 kids at this point. She puts the kids to bed and it's 9 o'clock at night. I haven't written a single card and I'm in the worst state possible. And guys, I couldn't do it. I literally could not access gratitude in that moment because it's like, and we get like that. It's this filter because then I'm looking at like, well, what could we have done differently? What could we have done better? Oh, that one call, what if the ref didn't do that? Like all this, armchair quarterback type of stuff, right? That we also get in our own life. Oh, if my assistant didn't drop the ball and call that person back, or if I was paying attention to my email, and we're pointing out all of our flaws and everything that went wrong. That's very easy to do, especially as a high achiever. So here was what was transformative. So there's a professor at UC Davis. He's the foremost researcher on gratitude, written several books on it, but his name is Dr. Robert Emmons. He has the best definition of gratitude I've ever heard, which is gratitude is the emotion one feels when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift.
Nice.
Gratitude is the emotion
like that
you feel when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift. That makes sense because when someone gives us a gift unexpected, that's very personal, that they surprised us with, how do we feel? We feel gratitude. Like, wow, you didn't have to do that. Thank you so much. The other part of that definition is the experience of something as a gift. But that makes sense when you think about earlier in your life, maybe your first relationship that you were in and it ended and it didn't end well. Right? Like, how did you feel in that moment? Women suck, men suck, life is over, right? You try to ask a kid in that moment, hey, where's the gift in this experience? They're going to, flip you the burger or go hide in their room, right? So it's hard to experience gratitude in the moment of pain. But here's the interesting thing. With time and perspective, years later, you can now look back on that moment, that previously painful experience, and you can say, well, I'm glad that happened.
Yep.
Because that happened, I learned all these things about myself. Because that happened, I actually met someone I was supposed to meet. I got married, I had a family, and I'm so grateful that happened, that relationship ended. So we can look back on this previously painful experience and feel gratitude. So the question becomes, how long does it take somebody to feel gratitude from pain? And the answer is, as long as it takes you to find the gift. So I'm sitting in my office and I'm racking my brain. Where is the gift? Where is the good? Where is the lesson? What is there good here? And it was like a light bulb went off and I said, oh my gosh, I didn't watch my team lose the national championship. I just watched arguably the best team in my school's history. This deserves celebration. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a handwritten card to every single member of the Gonzaga men's basketball team and the entire coaching staff. And so I go to ncaa.com. I'm looking at all their games, all their key plays, newsreels. So every card is personal. They're like, full double side of a card for each individual, including the red shirts.
John, real quick, personal to people that you don't know.
Right. Correct. Right. So, but to make them personal, I had to do research. And I think that's a kind of an interesting aspect of how do you thank somebody you don't know? You become curious, right? You engage. And so I found all these specific things. I thanked them for their impact, even the red shirts. I said, hey, championship teams are not made in the championship game. They're made in every practice that led up to it. So thank you for helping our team be its best. So I write all these books. I write all these cards. I send them out. I forget I do this, right? But here two things that happen. Number one, instantly, I feel better. Instantly, that pain, depression, frustration automatically shifted to joy. To the moment of, what it's like if your team loses a big game and then the next day people are like, oh, sorry, your Eagles lost, sorry, your Chiefs, whatever it is, right? And you feel like, oh, don't bring it up, right? No, if someone said that, I would authentically say, man, this was the best season we've ever had. And I would mean it. And so there's an interesting thing. Can you do that in other areas of your life that you've experienced pain and find the good and find the gift? That is when I say the person who has the ability to access gratitude at any moment is the most powerful person in the room, because that's part one. Second part, inadvertently, 2 months later, I forget I even do this because it's like Groundhog Day. Every day I got 5 more cards, 5 new people. It's just over and over. 2 months later, on my birthday of all days, May 21st, I'm out to dinner with my wife. She hands me an envelope, says, oh, by the way, this showed up for you today. And I open it, and it's a handwritten card from Mark Few, the head coach of Gonzaga men's basketball, thanking me for every card that I wrote the team, thanking me for showing up with hope during a difficult ending to the season, and just appreciating me for being an alumni. And I think we talked about this before we started recording, which is we value those that bring positive energy in the relationship. And I don't know that Mark Few, if you guys don't know, he's one of the greats in college basketball coaching, makes millions of dollars, sponsored by Nike, all the big teams. And of everything he could do with his time, he wrote me, a lowly fan, a handwritten thank you card. And I can't tell you how much that means to me. And ultimately, really, inadvertently, how much those cards meant to the team.
John, I think it's so powerful here what you just shared. And I think what's interesting is this conversation started off going down this path with, when you're not in gratitude, how do you get into gratitude? Like, how do you put yourself into that place? And we run across people all the time that are like, I'm just not going to do that system because I'm not in gratitude. And what I just learned from you and gathered from you is that state that they're in is the element. It's kind of like the kindling to go find gratitude if you want to take the opportunity. It's not the roadblock. It's actually the piece that you need if you really want to go find a really powerful note to write, is being in those places and acknowledging this maybe time that you need to say thank you and others need to be acknowledged. Like you're almost like looking for those moments, if I'm hearing you correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where this project was so powerful and transformative, is I had to do it. It was like that or pay $1,000, bro. Like, I didn't like my alternative.
I was really going to be bummed if you were going to tell us a story about how you wrote a check that night. I was going to be like, that is not what I wanted to hear.
So I pulled out my checkbook and I wrote
Yeah. No.
Well, interesting too, if you flip it around, let's say Gonzaga won, right?
Right.
How easy would it be to write a thank you note to, the 5 starters then, right? And just say like, hey, thank you guys for an amazing season and capping it off with an incredible victory. Congratulations and all that stuff, which still I'm sure you would go and do the personal research and all that. But I wonder if it would have the same level of gratitude impact as...
I don't think the notes would have been written.
The way you did it.
I don't think the notes would have been written. I think it would have just, even if you had the moment of writing the notes, even if the project was going on, I think you would have celebrated the win, and I don't know if the notes would have come out of that. I think you probably would have gotten into like, greatest day gratitude. Who have I been around? Who have I been talking to lately? Oh my gosh, I got all this great energy.
That's true.
I don't know if the team would have got, I'm not, John, I might be speaking for you, but I don't know if the team would have got the notes if it wasn't for the loss and finding the real people that needed the note. Like, I think that's such an incredible story.
Yeah. Well, and what's fun, and just to share transparently, again, our mission is not that you hear my story and say, wow, what a great guy. Like, it's to go do something. So I don't know if for any other sports fans, there was a woman from who was a graduate of TCU who heard my keynote. And if, for anybody who noticed, TCU made it to the NCAA football championship and got massacred. It was a terrible game. And she said, hey, you know what? Let's appreciate the team. And so she sent messages out to everybody. Guys, they collected thousands and thousands of thank you cards for TCU. It actually made it on the news. The coach talking about all these cards he received and how grateful he was to the people of Fort Worth and the love they poured on the team because she heard that story. And so I don't want people to hear me and think, wow, good for him. I want you to hear this and be like, wow, where can I apply that?
Yep.
Where in my life, my business, my community, can I bring some type of a project like this? Because that's where the power is.
Oh, absolutely. That's where all the power is. And I think that, and which is why we're so grateful to have you on here. And I think, even with that too, sometimes people need that extra push, that extra understanding of how does this all come full circle? I mean, personally, and I know the 3 of us will share this, that the experience of gratitude is probably enough for us and probably enough for the people who are listening too. But when we then start looking at this, when it comes into systems, like you had to write those 5 notes.
Right.
And even then, sometimes it's like, okay, well, I can feel some gratitude, but I also I'm having some level of impact like I did with Gonzaga, but there were probably several notes you wrote that went unanswered. You didn't hear from people. You mentioned that in the book, but you're like, hey, but the energy is out there. But how do we then tie this to business? What are the results that did happen for you when you went through this project?
I love this question because invariably when I do a keynote for a company, we do Q&A and it's always a guy who asks this question. He raises his hand. He's like, John, I love this idea. Sounds great. but what's the ROI of gratitude? Like, did you measure it? Did you track it? And two things. Number one is I respond with a different question and I simply ask him, what is the cost of taking people for granted?
Yep.
Because that has a cost as well, right? And there's, other stories I can go into later about, the impact of building relationships that have gone stale and utilizing a handwritten card to initiate and engage that conversation. But I do eventually answer his question because there was a net ROI that we found, and I wrote about it. It's the last chapter of the book. And so here's a couple of things we learned. So in our business, in our gifting company, we have a rate of cancellation, right? Just, I'm assuming most everyone who's listening is in real estate, right? So you have a number of listing presentations you do where you sign a contract and for whatever reason, client goes cold, doesn't work out, right? You're with the buyer, you're showing them houses, and then they're like, you know what? It's too tough right now. We don't feel like this is the right time, and then back out, right? So how do you respond in that moment? Or maybe even worse, you're in escrow, you're in contract, and then the buyer is like, I got cold feet, I'm nervous, I don't want to sell my mom's house, we should keep it in the family. And then they pull out, and then you can't get them on the phone. That moment, right? That anger, that frustration, the moment you lose the deal, same thing. How does that feel? Right. So one of the things is we have that in our business, which is an attrition ratio, which is we lose a certain number of clients because it's just the law of large numbers. You will not keep every person who you sign a contract with. And so we built in a process that the moment a client cancels a deal or returns their product or whatever it is, we will automatically send them a thank you card. And what we put inside of it is we will make a note of acknowledging that now wasn't the right time and that we really appreciate that they took the time to sit down and work with us. And if there's anything that we did in error, please forgive us for that. But we just want to say thank you for the opportunity and time to work with you. If anything ever changes in the future, please feel free to reach out with us. We'd love to work with you. So we call it a warm let go, a warm let go. And here's the crazy stat. 50% of our cancellations came back within 6 months. That's when you look at profitability, the less money you lose, the more money you make. And so we implemented this as a part of our system for the moment we lose a deal. And two things. Number one, it's actually kind of a therapeutic process because you have to get over yourself and get over the emotion of the lost commission you were about to have. And two is it actually builds a bridge because think of your client, how do they feel on the other side of that? Like they probably feel embarrassed, a little ashamed, like they've been stringing you along for a long time and they feel terrible, right? So they don't feel good. So when they receive something from you that says, hey, I know this didn't work out right now, and that's okay. We still appreciate you and we're grateful for our relationship. And when things do change for you and you want to move forward on this, let us know. We'd love to help you. What that does, and this is important with the decision-making process, is that people need to have what's called psychological safety. They need to feel good in relationship to you. And so when you're giving them a way out, like, hey, you don't have to feel bad right now. It's all good. We'd still love to work with you. Here's our contact info. What it does so many things because what do most people think on the other side of that? Oh, they probably hate me. They never want to answer my call again. I should probably block them on Facebook. Yep. Like that's sometimes how we feel. If any of you guys, by the way, have either of you for any personal or financial reason had to end a deal, not necessarily in real estate, but just something that you bought, you had to return, that maybe you overbought, or maybe it just wasn't the right time, so you had to return it?
Oh yeah.
Has either of that happened to you?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. All the time.
Yeah. How many of you have gotten a thank you card after that?
No, never.
What's really interesting, Jonathan, I'm sitting here listening to you. So we have a philosophy in our coaching company that I've kind of instilled is that when somebody needs to go, let them go. And they've got things that they need to go figure out. And we want to support them in that moment, not make them. There's so many companies that turn that into a high pressure, don't let the client go, don't lose the sale, don't lose this opportunity.
Sure.
And the example that always sticks out to me, and I'm not going to name any names here, but I bought a car years ago that had a satellite radio system that came with the car. And they're like, you get a year of it for free. And I remember the year came up on it and they said, well, we're going to, we know you love it. We can see you listening to it. Here's what it costs to stay on with it. And I was like, it is pretty good. And I dropped the money to stay with the service. Their marketing worked. It was perfect. But what's interesting is a year later when I had a music service on my phone, and all of a sudden I was like, I don't need this satellite radio anymore. I canceled it, and immediately I got a phone call and they said, we're willing to offer it to you for 50% off. We'll give you a 50% discount on the service if you stay with us right now. No, I'm good. we worked it all the way down from what was like $100 like a month, all the way down to like $19.99 is what they had got this thing down to per month. And then finally at the end of it, I'm like, I am so upset at your company now that you can charge me, that you can get away with this $19.99, that I am out of here. Like, I will never use your service again. And what a different approach it would have been to have a handwritten note come from them saying, we're so grateful that you tried out our service, that you used it for a year, and we just want to say thank you. And obviously you have other services. Like, I would have I would be telling a very different story right now of that company, actually, is what would be happening.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting point is if somebody brought up to you, oh, I'm thinking of getting XYZ radio, you would have a different reaction either way, right? On the one hand, you'll be like,
yep,
dude, don't do it. They'll never let you go, right? Or, you know what? Those are good guys. I had a good experience there. You might not say you don't use them anymore, but they left you. So here's a concept we teach that's super important as it relates to client loyalty over time, is what we call positive emotional resonance. Positive emotional resonance. When people think of you, your product or service, how do they feel? As a business owner, as a realtor, do you pass the cell phone test? Do you guys know what the cell phone test is?
Oh, I know exactly. Yes, keep going.
Right. So the cell phone test is when you call when your name shows up on someone's caller ID.
Do they answer
it? And how do they feel? How do they feel in that moment? Is it like, oh, it's just that realtor again. He could probably ask me for leads. Hey, who do you know is looking to buy or sell right now? Are they going to do that? Or is it like, oh, it's Matt. I love Matt. Matt's always calling to ask about my family, and he's a great dude. He's a family guy. And I just love talking to Matt. Matt, what's up, man? There's a different experience. And so take responsibility for that. And that's going to have a big difference on how your business plays out over time.
John, I had somebody recently, this is a couple of years back, and they said, nobody answers the phone anymore. Nobody likes talking on the phone. And I had to respond back with, no, they just don't like talking to you. Like, that's the problem. People love talking on the phone. And
I love that.
That cell phone test in that way is so darn true. And you can learn real quick how people see you just by the matter of fact of what they'll pick up the phone when you call. But that state of gratitude that you bring into the world, like that is the key factor of that piece of it.
It's brand equity.
Yeah.
Which leads to, with Ninja Selling, John, the whole point of the system is to build great relationships so that you can receive more referrals as well. That's the side effect of doing all this wonderful thing and being of value. And the brand effect of expressing gratitude to people does exactly that, right? If you pass the cell phone test, even if, like you said, with Garrett's experience with satellite radio, which there's really only one company left out there, right? So
it was a while back. We'll just go. It was a 2007 truck.
And okay, how did those referrals then come in? If there's a negative experience, it's never going to happen, because as we refer, we want to feel good about the referral and we want to look good when it comes back around. And I'm not going to refer Garrett to John if I know that John's not, may not have the great experience with Garrett. But if I know Garrett's going to provide a great experience, even if the pricing may not work out or they may not do a deal, the experience is going to be good. That's going to reflect well on me. And it's amazing how a simple handwritten note can build that brand equity with a client, whether it's even if everything's gone well. I mean, a lot of people say, well, all my clients love me. They come back and use me again, but I'm not receiving referrals. And I said, well, maybe they know that you're really good at being a realtor, but do they know how great you are as a person? Do they feel great in their connection with you? And that's where the gratitude expression, particularly through a handwritten note, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about some other ways of sharing gratitude as well, but that's why, for those listening, in the Ninja 9, the 2 handwritten notes a day is there because it can create that incredible connection that sometimes we forget to do when we're in person and we're going through the process of a deal and everything, because we're so focused on this really high value, high stress, very important deal. Sometimes we forget to do that. And if you add it in, man, it can change a whole lot. So I love how you share that, John.
And going back to Gonzaga for a second, like the gratitude's on both sides. And I think that's the most important part to understand about this aspect of giving gratitude, is that you bring gratitude into yourself. It's not that you find the gratitude and then you go like give that out to the world. It's like the act of doing this brings gratitude into both sides. So it's like the bar is raised all over the place when you take this step. So, John, you made a comment early on here. I think it was before we even started, where you said, your company, the Mr. Thank You Project, and what you're growing here, it's about giving gratitude. I mean, yeah, we're talking about handwritten notes, and I do want to get into the aspects of how you write, because I know there's an equation to how to write a powerful note, or I think you said a legendary thank you note is what you said to me up front. But your company, you guys focus on bringing gratitude in lots of different ways. Can you expand on that for me for a second, to kind of all the ways you've found to bring gratitude to people's lives?
Totally. So Mr. Thank You in and of itself is a strategic gifting company. So we work with a few different brands. I'm sure some of them, people on this call will know. We work with Cutco knives. We work with a cutting board company out of North Carolina that makes handcrafted, veteran cutting boards. We work with some drinkware companies. Here's the thing. It actually doesn't matter the product. What matters is the nature in which you give it and how you position it, right? So let me give you an example. So there's a woman I met on a plane recently. And I always love to network and meet high-level people, and, very unassuming, younger 30s woman. I was like, we had a conversation that was really powerful about faith and about business. And turns out she was in financial services, but works with very high level, high net worth clients. And so I decided, I'm going to send her a Cutco knife. Now, normally, what people might do is they might brand it with their logo, name, and cell phone number, hey, give me a call whenever. And I think there's a time and place for that. But what our conversation really revolved around was faith. And this particular woman was talking about, she's not married yet. She'd really love to get married. And so I found a particular Bible verse that really spoke to that goal. And I had that engraved on the knife. And I had that sent to her with a handwritten card saying how wonderful it was to meet her. And, I'm sure she's going to find somebody great. And, please stay in touch if there's anything you need. Right. And she gets this, guys, not kidding. Yesterday, she sends me a picture. She had it put into a framed shadow box. It is literally now hanging in her office. I'm like, well, the goal was for you to chop something with it, but I'll take hanging it on your wall as a win. And clearly, I'm a very happily married man. I have 4 kids, right? There was no desire to make that type of a connection, but it was really who I am for you is I really hope you get this thing in life. I'm present to, and this is actually important, when we talk about relationship building and also what goes into a quality handwritten card, there's this concept I teach called the VOW framework of human connection. VOW, values, outcomes, weaknesses. Values, what does this person care about deeply? What matters to them? Are they a family person? Is faith big for them? Is sports a big thing for them, right? When you get present to that, you can relate over simply those things. Outcomes, which are their goals? What are they trying to achieve? What are their biggest dreams in life? Why do they want to sell this house? What are they hoping to gain out of it, right? Someone's potentially going to move to brokerages, right? What's your goal in real estate? What do you want to accomplish over the next 5 years? Being present to that. And W is their weaknesses. What are you struggling with? What's hard for you? What are you dealing with right now? Because as long as someone shows up in relationship and we're talking about one of those 3 things, what I care about, what my goals are, and what I'm struggling with, and you can help me solve and honor those things, man, I want you in my life forever. So when I'm meeting somebody, those are the questions I'm looking to answer in different ways. I might say, so I'm really curious, what got you into real estate? If you're talking to someone for a recruiting conversation, what are your goals over the next top 5 goals over the next 3 years of your life? What's the biggest thing you're struggling with in your current company that you're not receiving support with? That's going to tell me exactly how to recruit this person. If I'm in a sales conversation, I'm going to be asking, hey, so tell me about how did you guys move to this area? What has you guys even thinking of moving right now? Tell me about other things not related to real estate, because then I'm understanding more about the things that they care about. So don't accidentally offend them by talking about a topic that is opposite of what they believe in value, right? Here's an interesting note, guys. You work with a lot of realtors. Have you guys ever noticed that a lot of people's clients are just different versions of them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Oh, yeah.
We have 29, 30 coaches right now. And I always laugh is because if I look at all their coaching clients, I'm like, they're just versions a lot of times of that coach in a different way. It's oh yeah, I see where this all comes together.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just to also know, is there a limitation there?
Yeah.
Right? If you're a single guy only working with single guys, or the opposite, right? If you're only narrowed down to a certain group of people, there's a section of the market you may not be able to get. Now, that doesn't mean change who you are. That means learn how to relate to people based on who they are. So finding these things out. What are your goals? Hey, what are your goals? What do you really want to happen with the sale of this house? What's important to you about that? Getting clarity about the goals. And then the weaknesses, what are you most afraid of that might happen in this transaction?
Yeah.
What are you concerned about that might happen in your move if you switch companies from where you are to where we are? And just anybody that I'm talking to, right? And it doesn't always need to be a direct conversation. Sometimes you might not understand their weakness until time in the relationship. But here's the key thing. When you notice it, you lean in and bring support. Because at the end of the day, let me ask you guys, when does loyalty matter?
When stakes are high, I would think.
It matters in so many different places. It elevates when all of a sudden there's a lot of things on the line, right? Particularly in a real estate transaction.
It always matters, right? That's part one. Secondly, doesn't it really matter when things are hard?
Yeah.
So who's going to show up for you when things are hard? The people who you showed up for when things were difficult. So this is where the project, I was just kind of, what I learned, so we ask about like what goes into a really good thank you note. It's those three things: values, outcomes, weakness. So I put this in a framework we call the ABCs of a legendary thank you note. So there's a difference. And I think this is important because we talked about this earlier with, some people who say, "Hi, man, I don't get the reaction from my cards that I hear you guys talking about. I don't even hear, people don't even say something back that they received it." And I get that. There's a stat I write in the book that only 10% of the people who received a card from me even said anything about it. That means 1,600 people said nothing. That's not easy to be with. But here's the point. There's a difference between recognition and acknowledgement. Recognition and acknowledgement. Recognition is saying thank you for what you did. Acknowledgement is saying thank you for who you are. And the difference there is the ABCs: attitudes, behaviors, and challenges, right? Attitudes are acknowledging their character qualities in the letter. Hey, thank you for being loving, for being trusting, for being patient, right? Acknowledging those character qualities about them. B is behaviors, which is what they do. Most people stick only the B in their thank you cards. They say, "Hey, thank you for the referral. Hey, thanks for the Christmas gift." And that is the obligatory gratitude we're talking about. They just focus on the behavior, which is like, okay, great. And the C is the challenges, which is, what is it that this person goes through to do what they do? Can I share a short story about this?
Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So this really highlighted on day 3 of the project. So day 3, I'm going to the airport. I got 2 legs of a flight to go from Los Angeles to Philadelphia for an event. And I'm boarding the plane, or I get to the boarding section, and I find out our flight's delayed, which is not great. And I haven't written any cards yet. And I'm thinking like, hey, who can I write my cards to today? And instantly I see the pilots sitting at the Chick-fil-A by the gate. And I'm like, oh my God, I've never formally thanked the pilots on my plane, right? I mean, they have, hundreds of people's lives in their hand every day. And how many of us actually take the time to authentically appreciate and thank these people, right? Often we treat them like glorified bus drivers. So I had this moment of like, well, that sounds cool. I'll thank them, but I don't know these guys. We've never met. So I walk up and I say, "Hey, do you guys mind if I sit down with you?" And they say, "Sure." So I'm going through like, my rapport building process. Like, how'd you guys get into this? And I asked 3 particular types of questions that significantly increased our connection in a short period of time. So 3 questions were, number 1, "Hey, so how did you guys get into this? How'd you become a pilot?" And what's interesting is they started sharing about their story. And people love to share their story. They love to share where they come from. And when we hear where they come from, we actually learn about their values. We learn about things they care about. We learn about their goals. Second question: "Hey, so what do you love about being a pilot?" And what's fun is when you do that, people get excited. They're talking about their favorite things, what they enjoy, what they love. And then the third question is, "Hey, what's the hardest thing about being a pilot? What's the biggest thing you struggle with in your job?" And after I asked those 3 questions, it instantly told me what to put in the cards. And essentially, this is what I said once we boarded the plane. I said, "Dear pilot, I'm sure it's strange to receive a thank you card from a passenger. But as I was boarding the plane today, I was thinking about how much I'm going to miss my family on this trip. And then I learned this is what you do every day for your job. I can't imagine how many birthdays, anniversaries, and special events you've sacrificed for your work, not to mention the hundreds, if not thousands of hours you spent in the cockpit training for your job, because nobody becomes a pilot by accident. All of that to have some bad weather, a slightly bumpy landing, and then have people complain about it. So whether you hear it enough or not, I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself and everybody on our flight. So I write 2 cards because there's 2 pilots on the flight. We land in the next destination. I get to physically hand them their cards while they're still in the cockpit because they were still there. And then I do this a second time for the next set of pilots on the second leg of my trip. So I give out 4 cards to 4 different pilots. Guys, this is what was crazy. Within 24 hours of landing in Philadelphia, now let me give a little point here. I had used my business stationery, which has my name, cell phone number, and email printed on the card. That's just all I had at the time. This is what was crazy. Within 24 hours of landing, 3 out of those 4 pilots personally contacted me to say thank you for the card. One went on to say, John, in my 12 years of flying, I have never received a thank you card from a passenger. A second one said, John, I really appreciate the acknowledgement. And this is the first time in 20 years that I get to be home for Christmas Day. And so when I think about how do you write an impactful card, it's not just acknowledging what people do. It's acknowledging who people are. What do they go through? What do they give up? Who are they that you've seen? Noticing people's greatness rather than their weakness, because we're always pointing out our own flaws. So if you can be somebody who shows up and is known for bringing good energy, acknowledging the good, people want to be in relationship with you. And being in a business where the more better relationships you have, the more you're going to make, it's actually a very good win-win scenario.
So John, what I love, and if I heard you correct when you started this was day 3 of a 365-day project. Is that correct?
Correct. That was day 3.
So this wasn't like you were well into the project. We're like, oh man, this thing actually works. Like this is day 3 of 365. And I think also what's really interesting is that as you started to get into this state of gratitude and acknowledging people and writing these notes and looking for the reasons to write these notes, one is it caused you to go sit down with these pilots. Now, you may have been the person always that would have maybe gone up to a group of pilots and just sat down and started a conversation with them. But I think having a project and a mindset of this all of a sudden opens up doors to say, I want to go ask some questions because there might be something here that I can write a note for or give somebody some gratitude around. The second is, as I was sitting here and thinking about, we've all been on a flight where you've had a really good flight attendant and we've had some that are really off the wall. And as I was sitting here listening to you, it's like, did that flight attendant who's really off the wall always be that way? Or is that somebody who really needs a handwritten note right now to say how much I appreciate who you are and the sacrifices that you make? And, thanks for making this trip possible for us. Once you get into that state of gratitude and acknowledgement, I now want to ask you this. Do you notice that all of a sudden you start seeing people all over the place that are worthy of a note?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that was one of the biggest takeaways, because we're all born with something called the negative bias, which is a proneness to look for what's wrong rather than what's right. And it's an evolutionary survival technique, because if you're always looking for the threat, then you're going to notice them and you're going to protect yourself. So that's actually a very good thing when we're in the jungle and you're worried about tigers and lions and, all that kind of stuff, right? Which berries are going to kill you, which ones won't, right? But we live in a modern society that you're probably not going to run into a tiger outside. For the most part, all the food you're going to eat is going to be good for you, right? So to speak. But yet we're still looking for what's wrong. That is why they designed the news the way it is, because they know you're going to look at it. It is in your biology. So having to find 5 people every day to appreciate, it's like you have to consciously put on a different set of lenses every day and just say, hey, who's doing something good? Who's doing something great that I can acknowledge? And the interesting thing, when you start to do this, you find ways that it overlaps, right? Like the pilots, well, that's relevant to a lot of different people. If you just ask them those 3 questions, how'd you get into what you're doing? What do you love about it? What's the biggest struggle with what you do? You can learn so much about anybody. You can learn things about your children, right? Hey, what are you working on right now, right? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you struggling with? Now, depending on their age, they may or may not share those with you, but the better you know those things, the better you know how to show up in relevance to that relationship. So definitely having this proneness to look for what's right, it just forces you to be finding what's good inside of people. And here's the kicker, you can notice it, and this is the big difference here, what we call passive gratitude and active gratitude. Passive gratitude is when you notice the emotions of gratitude, when you just see, oh, wow, they're doing something great. Oh, that's great. I feel good and I keep it internally. The moment you express that gratitude, it multiplies an impact because it's a very vulnerable thing to do, number one. But two, it also now lives somewhere else in another person. So then it multiplies, right? So there was actually research on this from Harvard where they did a study of students who are needing help on a paper. And they had the students, when they would receive two groups of students, they would ask a friend, hey, would you mind looking over my paper? And they would send back the edits. And they had the two groups. One would acknowledge and appreciate the editor. The other group gave no acknowledgement and appreciation. They simply said, I'll look over your feedback. What they noticed, they then had those same students come back and ask those people again, hey, I have another paper. Would you be willing to give me feedback on this? They found that 85% of the people who had been acknowledged gave the feedback again. And on the opposite side, only about 45% of the people who didn't receive any acknowledgement chose to edit again. So when you think about someone who is in a constantly negative state, you're also seeing somebody who probably doesn't get much appreciation in their life.
Yeah. So you can give somebody the gift of accelerating their own life, their own business by just acknowledging them, right? And it's not just acknowledging them, it's actually acknowledging them in a real way. And John, you mentioned it takes a level of vulnerability as well to express gratitude. And you actually mentioned in your book too, like, hey, you also have to be ready for what comes around. You have to be open to receiving things as well, right? You mentioned the assistant bringing you lots of, all of a sudden being very, very helpful to you, almost to the point of like, okay, I need to do work now. Thank you for your help, because you wrote her a note. So could you just share some thoughts? Because this is such a great point, because a lot of people do this. They're like, oh, I'm going to go tell everybody I'm super grateful for them, and then do nothing, right? Like they're going to go to my voicemail. I'm not going to respond to their emails. And so you have to keep the cycle going here too.
Yeah. So here's an interesting, so I'll clarify that story you were talking about. So I housed our gifting company inside of a real estate office because we had a good relationship with them, and, we're around our ideal clients, right? And there was a front desk woman who's just always sweet and always, at the front desk, greeting people and greeting my clients and greeting me. And so I just wrote her a card and I just said, hey, I just want you to know that you make my day great, because every time I come in, even if I'm not having a great day, I can count on you smiling and you bringing great energy. And I just want to say, I'm so grateful to be here because you do an amazing job of welcoming people to this building. Super simple, right? Bro, you would have thought I was like her son-in-law all of a sudden, because she's just like, I baked you a pie, just like bringing things to my office. I'm like, oh my gosh. But by the way, everything I said was true. I wasn't trying to get something out of it. I was simply trying to play abundantly.
Right.
Right. And here's a great takeaway, which is generosity is the currency of abundant relationships. Generosity is the currency of abundant relationships. So if you want more abundant referrals, just play more generously with people. And here's the thing, to go to the second point, which is, how do you respond in how does a relationship change? Well, the hardest thing about this entire project was not writing all the cards. It was how I now had to show up for people as someone who believed everything I wrote. Because you don't get to tell somebody, hey, I love you, and then treat them like crap and not expect an impact in the relationship. You don't get to tell your assistant how much you appreciate them and value them at the team meeting, but then berate them for a mistake they make on a file when they screw up. Right? You don't get to say one thing, act differently, and not expect an impact in the relationship. In fact, it makes it worse, because the only thing worse than no sincerity is fake sincerity. Because if you put something on paper, but you don't believe it and you don't live it, they're going to smell that out, and it's actually going to damage your relationship than if you never sent something at all. So the power for me was now not just writing these things, but like continuing to engage in those relationships and talk to people and do things for them and actually show up as someone who, not just in this moment when I wrote this card, felt these feelings about a person, but try to like activate that regularly. And this became a mantra of a question, which is, how do you treat that for which you are grateful? Because if I say, I'm grateful for you, Like, how could you know my gratitude for you without me ever telling you I'm grateful for you?
Yep.
How would you know that without me ever writing you a note? That became what I would say is like the second project, which is like, that was like very mature into the year-long journey. And that's kind of more what I've been dealing with now. And truthfully, that actually came back to more my family. Man, I tell my wife, writing her cards and saying things, but how do I show up as a husband, as a father? I can say I appreciate my kids, but how can I prove that with my time in my calendar and where I spend my money and my attention? What's very obvious is I care about my business, but do I really care about my family? That was one of the big changes that occurred post project.
That's incredible.
Oh, I love that you shared this because, like in the book, The Thank You Economy, he talks about people's BS meters are really high nowadays. And I tell everybody, if you're going to do anything, be genuine, be authentic. The minute the people find that you're the unauthentic side of what you're doing, you damage everything that you're trying to achieve. And the biggest thing is just there are a lot of people come to us, and I'm so happy that we've been able to share time with you here today and do this, because at the end of the day, a lot of people who listen to the podcast and like, at the end of the day, you're just telling people to be good people, right? Like, just be nice to people. And like, I'm like, it's really an incredible thing. Yes, at the end of the day, we're talking about how do you be a better person and take care of people and be good to people. And John, like, your project here, man, is incredible. And I'm so grateful to spend time with you. And we need to spend more time together. The more that I'm sitting here listening to you and talking with you, I'm like, I need more time with John. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today? We are well over on time that we even thought that we were going to be hanging out with you. Is there anything that we didn't share today that you would love to be able to share with the audience?
Part of me doing this project was, again, to inspire other people to do their own version of it. And me doing it at such an extreme level, what's below that is I want people to hear this and be like, that's crazy. I would never do that. But I might do 1 card a day. I might do 2 cards a day. And I would say 2 things. So number 1, if you are a client of Ninja, like for sure, like take the Ninja 9 a little bit more seriously. And I hope that you approach your cards that you write a little differently, utilizing the ABCs, attitudes, behaviors, and challenges. And 2 is to just do a challenge for yourself, right? To do this for 30 days. So we have a giveaway at mrthankyou.com. So if you just go to our website, mrthankyou.com, the first thing on there, if you opt in for our email list, we'll give you a 30-day challenge. And it's just, I give you templates of the types of cards that I write. There's examples of different letters that you can write to people. I mean, here's the thing we didn't talk about today, but one of the most powerful parts of the project was when I actually stopped writing thank you cards and I started writing apology cards to people whose relationships that got damaged over time in my life. That was life-changing. So I put some examples of apology cards that you can write. There's a whole litany of ways that you can use this project for yourself. And I would encourage you to start with a 30-day challenge and see what you might do. We've had companies take this on as a project, and we had one company got the whole company's buy-in. They committed to writing 5,000 thank you cards as a company collectively in the month of November. We had a woman who was inspired, and she went to her kids' school to give her own quote unquote Mr. Thank You talk to teach about my story and inspire these kids to write thank you cards. That day, she had 805 kids handwrite thank you cards ranging from kindergarten until 8th grade. And then all the upperclassmen committed to a 30-day challenge. So what is there to do from here? Just do it. Just test this out yourself. Prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Spend more of your day in gratitude, love, and appreciation, not just to feel it internally, but to express it, and tell me your life isn't different. And stay in touch with me. You can find me everywhere on Instagram, Facebook. And if you feel this message is relevant for your audience, I do lots of keynotes and speak to companies all the time. And I think what's so fun about what I get to do is that this is not expensive. I'm not like, hey, pay me $497 a month to get in shape. It's like, no, like this costs you basically $0. You probably already have 1,000 thank you cards in your desk right now. Let's just make this a system. Let's build it into your framework of your business. And let's go out there and be grateful humans, and this is the thing that I'll end with, which is I have 4 kids. Oldest is 9, and I won't be here forever. And they're going to live into a world that I'm not in. And if I have the ability to impact the world that they step into, to be surrounded by more consciously grateful and appreciative people, and I have a say in that, I want to do that. And so my invitation to you is, if you want a better life for your kids and family as well, consider that this might be one of the tools for you to do that costs you nothing, is proven to be contagious, and it grows your business at the same time.
That's really powerful, John. And I want to thank you for sharing that, for sharing your energy, for sharing your mission with us and with the world, and for sharing your project and embarking on that and going through all of the challenges that come along with figuring out how to express gratitude, figuring out how to be a grateful person. When we started, you mentioned the whole reason why you wanted to do this project is because inside you were not that way. And I just appreciate you for doing that and for sharing the time with us today, man. And I know that people are going to listen to this and they're going to be outrageously inspired. They're going to want to take action. And I encourage everybody to take action immediately as you feel that. And again, that's mrthankyou.com, correct, John, for people to find you?
Yeah, mrthankyou.com.
Yeah, mrthankyou.com, Mr. Thank You. So, man, that's incredible. Thanks, John. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys. And by the way, thanks to you guys for being a stand for the successful people's business. I think below, you probably heard that a little bit in my last statement, but below the surface of everything I do is that people can have a more successful business so they can spend more time with their families.
Absolutely.
And I know at the core of what you guys do is you're not just about, educating the salesperson to go sell more things to more people, but to really help them live better lives. Because I think the better families are, the better our world's going to be.
Well, John, we speak the same language. So again, I want to say thank you so much to you for your time. Matt, thank you for bringing John into my world because you are the element that made that all happen. So thank you for that, sir. And all the listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you want to learn more about John Israel and Mr. Thank You Project, go check that out. If you want to learn more about Ninja Selling, go check out ninjaselling.com. You can hear about our coaching program there, all of our offerings. And then our Facebook community, if you're not a part of that, go check that out. John, if you're not on it, go check that out. That we are at about 14,000 people in there right now. We're just cresting that mark. And like-minded people that if you want to get in there and share literally what we've talked about today and build a community of people in there that think these same lines, they're all there. The ninjas are attracted to this type of information. So that's who you're going to be hanging out with. We appreciate everybody. John, I'm going to say, well, thank you one more time. Really a pleasure to meet you, man. And this has been great. And thank you.
You're welcome, man. Awesome. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode and would like more, visit us at theninjasellingpodcast.com.
There you will also find links for more information about ninja selling and coaching. Have an incredible day.